multimillionaire widower Steve Beard fell in love with the much younger Celeste Martinez, he thought he'd found a loving companion that he could spend his final days with. However, once Celeste gets Steven's ring on her finger, she realizes she's won the lottery, as she uses her new husband as her personal ATM. And when she realizes her husband is worth more to her dead than alive, Celeste hatches a diabolical scheme that will destroy everyone in its path. Hello and welcome to The Dark Side of Love. I'm your host, Bianca Sloan, author of suspense novels about the dark side of love, and this week I'm putting a spotlight on the case I'm calling The Black Widow. Born into poverty in Dallas, Texas on November 27, 1924, Stephen Beard aspired to a better life from a young age. Initially, he wanted to be a doctor, but with the intrusion of World War II, he instead joined the Navy. After being discharged, Stephen returned home to Dallas and started working for a local department store, which is where he met Elise Adams in 1951. The couple married and went on to have 3 children, Stephen III, Paul, and Becky. Even though Stephen had more ambition than money, he didn't let that deter him. He moved to Austin in order to take a low-level advertising job, eventually working his way up the ladder to become a successful executive. However, despite the success he was having, he wanted more. In 1983, Stephen became one of the co-founders of local Austin independent TV station KBVO, Channel 42, taking on the role of general manager while continuing to work full-time in the advertising business. Stephen essentially becomes a media mogul, as Channel 42 quickly became an incredibly successful independent TV station. In 1993, Stephen's life changed forever when his beloved wife of 42 years, Elise, died of brain cancer. Stephen is devastated, and a year later, he sold the station for $54 million and retired. At this point, Steve is insanely wealthy and extremely single, which you know what that means, or as his son Stephen III told Dominic Dunn's Power, Privilege, and Justice, quote, "Some of the single women were just like vultures circling around a dead cow in the desert." Steve spent a lot of his spare time at the Austin Country Club, which is where he met 30-year-old waitress Celeste Martinez. Born in 1963 in Camarillo, California, Celeste never knew her biological parents. She was adopted, and according to Celeste, she was sexually and physically abused by her adoptive father, and that when she did meet her biological mother years later, she was told, quote, "I am not your mother. I was just your incubator." Ouch. Celeste moved in with her high school boyfriend, Craig Bratcher, eventually becoming pregnant by the age of 17 and then marrying Craig in 1980. She later gave birth to twin girls, Jennifer and Christina. Celeste says that Craig was abusive and had issues with drugs and alcohol. Eventually, she fled the marriage, taking the girls with her, living for a time in Washington State and Arizona. This also triggered a cycle of multiple marriages, substance abuse issues, and stints for the twins in numerous foster care homes. In 1993, Celeste headed to Austin for a fresh start, which put her in contact with Stephen, who, besides being wealthy, was generally considered to be a really good guy. Loyal, funny, affectionate, generous, total catnip to someone who'd had a long string of bad marriages and abuses. Celeste told Snapped behind bars that it was within 2 weeks of Stephen's wife Elise dying that Stephen asked her out, and that within a month he asked her and the girls to move into his mansion in the Westlake neighborhood of Austin, which is a very, very nice part of town. This was the first time that Jennifer and Christina had experienced any real measure of security in their lives. According to Stephen III, at first, Celeste was the housekeeper, and then the next thing he knew, his dad was bringing her around to different events, that they were traveling around the world together, really a companion. And everyone says that above all, Stephen was lonely and that he wanted a companion, someone to share his final years with in peace and happiness, which are all compelling reasons as to why he was so drawn to Celeste. And on top of that, I mean, she's attractive. She has a really pretty smile, cute figure. She's blonde. I mean, guys are suckers for blondes, right? And I'm sure she was nice and charming and all of that. But Loneliness is a powerful aphrodisiac, and it can lead to bad decisions, namely marriage. If it's not the right person, that can be a bad decision. As Steve's son, Stephen III, told Dominic Dunn's Power, Privilege, and Justice about his father, quote, "He was his own man. I could have jumped off the University of Texas tower with a banner that said, 'Don't do it,' and it wouldn't have made a difference." And so, on February 18th, 1995, Stephen and Celeste got married. The groom was 70, the bride 32. As mentioned, nobody really thought that this was a love match, and in due time, Celeste shed all pretense of being any kind of a sweet and humble little woman who appreciated any little crumb that you threw her. Now, Celeste did sign a prenup, and as a wedding gift was given a cash gift of $500,000. And after 3 years of marriage, she would get an additional $500,000. Well, Celeste spent that initial $500,000 in 6 months. 6 months. As Andrea Ball, who covered this story for the Austin American-Statesman, told Snapped Behind Bars, quote, "Celeste would buy a new Cadillac the way I would buy a Reese's peanut butter cup on the way out of the supermarket. There were cars, jewelry, shoes, clothes. She was spending up to $30,000 a day. Price tags meant nothing. Credit limits were to be ignored. Celeste is out here spending money like the apocalypse is coming and we're all going into underground bunkers or something. Like there's just no limit to what she will spend money on." Now, one major plus of Stephen and Celeste getting married was that he adopted her teenage daughters, Jennifer and Christina. It was the first time that the twins had lived with their mom for any length of time, and finally they were able to make lasting friendships. They had a loving and stable father figure in their lives for the first time. Jennifer loved and admired Steve so much that she told Dominic Dunn's Power, Privilege, and Justice that, quote, "She considered him my second natural father." Stephen adored the girls, so much so he wrote them into his will. Now, while the twins love Steve, Celeste, it seems, does not. In addition to spending all of Steve's money, Celeste decides that she really wants to be married in name only and starts an affair with her ex-husband, of all people, Jimmy Martinez. Jimmy and Celeste start acting like a married couple, for example, throwing a blowout bash for Jennifer and Christina's 18th birthday. And even though he probably paid for it, Steve was not invited. Celeste was described by her daughter's friends to Dominic Dunn's Power, Privilege, and Justice as someone who was wild and unpredictable, who didn't seem to realize that she was an adult and not one of the kids. According to what Justin Grimm, who was a friend of Jennifer and Christina, told Dominic Dunn's Power, Privilege, and Justice, Celeste would tell everyone that, quote, Steve was old and couldn't satisfy her, but Jimmy could. And according to Christopher Dews, who he's Jennifer's former boyfriend, he told that same program that one of Celeste's favorite pastimes was to call Steve names like fat ass and daddy warbucks, and that, quote, he loved her so much he put up with all her crap. But Steve's not quite the fool that Celeste takes him for. First, he finds out that she has run up some $300,000 in bills, and then second, his banker informed him that Celeste had stolen some silver and jewelry out of his safety deposit box that had belonged to his late wife, Alyssa. When he finds this out, he goes ballistic. He tells Celeste that the marriage is over, and he kicks her out. At first, Celeste tries the charm offensive, writing Steve a heartfelt letter about how much she values everything he has done for her, how she loves him with all of her heart, all that kind of stuff. Well, Steve is not into it, he's not buying it, and he decides that he's going to move ahead and divorce Celeste. This is when Celeste decides to go for broke. She threatens to slit her wrist, she's going to swallow a bottle of pills, and when none of those threats work, she holds a gun to her head and threatens to take herself out. And she actually does pull the trigger, but there aren't any bullets in it, so ultimately, it's a hollow threat. Still, it is enough to make Steve crumble, and he decides that he can't abandon Celeste. He loves her, he's going to stick with her, he's going to stick with the marriage. His son, Stephen III, told Dominic Dunn's Power, Privilege, and Justice that he believes some of his father's devotion is generational, that Steve came from an era where you just didn't walk away from a marriage. You stuck it out for better or for worse. Steve checks Celeste into Timberlawn, which is a premier psychiatric facility in Dallas. And it's there that she meets a woman by the name of Tracy Charlton. Tracy Charlton hails from a wealthy society family and has been diagnosed as bipolar. Her mother was abusive, and Tracy had struggled with substance abuse issues and had a history of being suicidal. Tracy says that she and Celeste hit it off right away. Or rather, Celeste was hitting on her right away, telling CBS that, quote, Celeste was extremely flirtatious with me from the beginning, and I responded in kind. Eventually, she came into my room and kissed me. She wanted to have a sexual relationship with me. According to Tracy, they consummated their relationship in March of 1999. When Celeste and Tracy were released from Timberlawn, suddenly Tracy's around all the time, and Steve, of course, doesn't like it. Celeste tried to play it off as though she and Tracy were just friends, buddies, curling each other's hair and painting each other's toenails. But it is obvious to everyone that they are banging the gong. And in fact, Christina catches Celeste and Tracy in bed together, kissing. Tracy becomes pretty fixated on Celeste. She'd always been a tomboy, and then all of a sudden, she's going to the hair salon, she's getting manicure, she's wearing pink. I mean, she's feeling herself, which, good for her. And Tracy, who is the manager for Book People, which is a big bookstore in Austin, was not shy about telling people about her girlfriend, Celeste. One of her coworkers, Jeremy Ellis, told CBS that, quote, Tracy wasn't secretive. Everyone in the store knew she was dating someone named Celeste. She spoke about her like she was her girlfriend. They were sort of physical, close with each other, and I thought, well, good for Tracy. Other employees noted that when Celeste came to a Book People party, she and Tracy were locking lips. Tracy also wrote passionate entries about Celeste in her diary and sent her cards and letters. Now, even though Tracy is totally besotted with Celeste, Christopher Deuce told Dominic Dunn's Power, Privilege, and Justice that Celeste had a lot of affairs, noting that, quote, every couple of weeks, it was someone new. The twins tell Steve about seeing Celeste and Tracy making out in bed, and hoping to break the bond between his wife and Tracy, Steve decides to take the family away to Europe for a long vacation. October 2nd, 1999. It's the day before the trip, and Steve, Celeste, and Christina are home packing while Jennifer is off at the family lake house with some friends. That night, at around 3 a.m., everyone is asleep. Unbeknownst to anyone, an intruder is in the house. At 3:13 a.m., a call comes into 911. It's Stephen Beard. He says, quote, my guts just jumped out of my stomach. As it turns out, Steve has been shot. Police and EMTs race to the house, and when they arrive, it's, of course, chaos. Jennifer and Christina tell the cops they didn't hear anything, and then all of a sudden, here comes Celeste, bursting into Steve's bedroom. She and Steve, they slept in separate rooms, but she's screaming for EMTs not to let her husband die. Steve is airlifted to the hospital, and police investigate the scene. Celeste has a ton of very expensive jewelry and artwork around the house, yet nothing was taken. So clearly, this is personal. But Steve is a beloved guy. He's a total sweetheart. So then the question becomes, who would want to shoot him and why? When police question friends and family about who might want to hurt Steve, Tracy's name comes up almost immediately. As Christopher Deuce told Dominic Dunn's Power, Privilege, and Justice, quote, she, meaning Tracy, was, I believe, obsessed with Celeste. You could tell that she wanted Steve gone. Police head to Tracy's house to question her, and when they get there, the first thing they see is a shrine to Celeste. Pictures, candles, the whole thing. Police head to Tracy's house to question her, and when they get there, the first thing they see is a shrine to Celeste. Pictures, candles, the whole thing. I mean, do you, boo. And it turns out that Tracy owned a shotgun, and there was a lone shell casing from a shotgun found at the crime scene. Police asked to see Tracy's gun, which has her name inscribed on it, and they realize that it's a 20-gauge shotgun, which is the exact kind of shotgun used to shoot Steve. That's enough for cops, and Tracy is arrested for shooting Steve, which she admits to doing it, but she won't say why. Celeste, meanwhile, is unbothered. Her husband has been shot, and initially she is glued to his bedside, playing the devoted wife, but because leopards and spots, she eventually takes off to Louisiana to go gambling, and she's buying herself an $80,000 piece of jewelry. She is somehow living her best life. Steve was in the hospital for months, finally being released on January 18, 2000 from the hospital into Celeste's care. Given his age and other health issues that he had, it's a miracle that he has survived this attempt on his life. And Celeste is given explicit instructions on how to care for the wound in his stomach. Unfortunately, within one day, Stephen is back in the hospital with a raging infection. His condition continues to deteriorate, and on January 22, 2000, Stephen Beard succumbs to a blood clot that is the direct result of being shot. Stephen Beard was 75 years old. With Steve's death, Tracy is now charged with murder. However, she still will not say why she shot Steve. Meanwhile, Celeste has problems of her own. At the time of his death, Steve was worth $10 million. His will dictated that Celeste would get $6.5 million in cash and property, and his 3 kids from his first marriage, and Jennifer and Christina, which are Celeste's kids who he adopted, they will evenly split whatever is left over. So Steve's assets were held in trust by a bank in Dallas, and about a week after he dies, Celeste sashays up there and is told that she's going to be put on a budget, and that the amount of withdrawals that she's allowed to make is going to be limited. In other words, she's not going to be able to crack open the piggy bank and swipe everything inside. Money is not the only thing on Celeste's mind. According to the personal assistant that she had hired, Donna Goodson, her primary reason to be was just to sleep all day and party all night. Donna said that she and Celeste hit the clubs on the regular, and that Celeste had quite a few guys in her lineup, and including a bartender by the name of Cole Johnson. And always in the back of her mind, it seems, is Tracy Charlton. According to Donna, Celeste said that her attorney told her it would take 2 pieces of evidence to indict someone for murder, including the gun and Tracy herself. Donna said there was every chance that Tracy was cooperating with police. It's at this point, according to Donna, that Celeste wanted to know if she knew of anyone who could get rid of Tracy. Celeste even went so far as to give Donna $500 to pass along to a hitman. And meanwhile, she's showing Donna where Tracy lives. She's showing her car, like casing everything. Donna didn't do anything, apparently, except ask for more money when Celeste wanted to know why Tracy wasn't dead yet. She complied, Celeste, by shelling out over $12,000 more. Again, who knows what happened to this money, right? Then, in July 2000, Celeste makes the decision to marry that bartender, Cole Johnson, about 6 months after Steve's death. And when Tracy sees this in the newspaper, she tells the cops, you know what, I am ready to tell it all, mention it all, and reveal exactly why she shot Stephen Beard. According to Tracy, Celeste had pretty much begged her to murder Steve because he was a monster, psychologically torturing her on a daily basis to the point that Celeste wanted to take her own life. Celeste had actually begun to wage her campaign while the 2 women were at Timberlawn. Tracy said Celeste told her that the only reason she had even married Steve was because she wanted to secure a better life for Jennifer and Christina, but that now she was trapped in a loveless, unbearable marriage. Tracy said that Celeste portrayed Steve as someone who was, quote, slowly killing her, slowly or quickly killing her, that she couldn't get out from under him, psychologically or emotionally. While at Timberlawn, Tracy and Celeste shared a room, which, according to Tracy, is when the relationship first started. When a staff member noticed Tracy giving Celeste a massage one day, Tracy was moved to a different room. Celeste told Tracy that it was Steve who had separated them. He was the one who had made this happen. Tracy went on to say that it was her feeling that Steve was just someone who threw around his money and power and bulldozed over everyone, including Celeste, that he was always grabbing at his wife, that she was nothing more than a plaything for him, a total victim to this overbearing bully. And, Tracy, remember, she came from a wealthy family, so she was probably used to seeing people use their money and influence to intimidate people, so it probably was not that hard to get her to believe that Steve was the same way, for her to make that connection in her head that he's just cut from the same cloth as the kind of people that she grew up around. Once they were released from Timberlawn, Tracy says the relationship between her and Celeste intensified as they frequently met up in local motel rooms. Tracy also shared that Celeste constantly was crushing up sleeping pills in Steve's food and replacing his nightly vodka with Everclear, which gasoline probably would have been better, also that he would pass out, leaving Celeste free to, quote, escape the house at night and go out to get away from him. And Celeste was clear that she hoped that sooner rather than later that giving Steve these sleeping pills and this horrible Everclear, that this would kill Steve, saying, quote, he's an old man, he's going to die soon, but not soon enough, and I'm just going to help him along wherever I can. Celeste also told the receptionist at her beauty salon about Steve, quote, she hated the bastard. She wished he was dead. Worse, one night, Celeste called Tracy and asked her to come over, and when she got there, Steve was passed out at the dining room table. They moved him from the floor, and then Celeste put a plastic bag over his head, hoping to asphyxiate him. And when that didn't work, Celeste asked Tracy, who, remember, manages a bookstore, to order her a book on poisons because she wanted to, quote, whip up a batch of botulism, as one does. Tracy said she was a willing participant in these attempts on Steve's life because she really and truly believed Celeste was in a torture chamber, saying, quote, I did believe everything she told me about what was going on, and I just felt real bad for her. And from what I knew, he was a horrible man and he wouldn't let her up. Also at the heart of this was Tracy's belief that she and Celeste were madly in love with each other, and that getting rid of Steve was the only way they could be together because he was standing in the way of their happiness. Things really started to come to a head when Steve was going to take Celeste and the girls to Europe, which happened the night before he was shot. They were packing, the night before he was shot for that trip to Europe. Celeste told Tracy that she didn't want to go on the trip because she really believed that Steve was just going to be coming down on her, pressing down on her to the point that it would drive Celeste to kill herself while she's on the trip. I mean, remember, this is Celeste's go-to. You don't do what I want, I'm going to kill myself. That's her number one thing out of her bag of tricks. Celeste pleaded with Tracy to shoot Steve and free her from the torment of her marriage, free her from the agony of living her life with this bully. Tracy kept refusing, and it was again after Celeste said, quote, well, then there's nothing left, going on to say she would take a gun and just shoot herself and end it all. And Tracy gives in because, again, she believes that she is saving Celeste from a nightmare, that she is swooping in and saving the day. Tracy said that Celeste promised her that if she was arrested, she would pay her legal fees, support her while she was in jail, and find homes for her pets. And so, on the afternoon of Friday, October 1st, Tracy and Celeste met to plan the shooting. Celeste showed Tracy where to park, how to get into the house, where Steve's bedroom was, the whole thing. Tracy made a point of telling Celeste that there would be a shell casing that would eject or be spent from the shotgun, and Celeste said, "No problem, girl. I'll pick it up. I'll get rid of it. Don't worry about it." She also assured Tracy that she would turn off the alarms and leave the patio door near Steve's bedroom unlocked. Celeste told Tracy to shoot Steve in the stomach, believing that would be less messy than, I guess, shooting him in the head, I guess. The plan was that if he did not die right away, Celeste would basically stand over him and wait for him to bleed to death before she called the police. Something happened. I don't know, because, Steve wound up calling 911 for himself, and Celeste wasn't even in the room. And so, I don't know, did she fall asleep or get distracted? But, almost everything went off without a hitch except for Celeste's part. Because Tracy came to the house around 2 a.m. She went in through that unlocked door. She went into Steve's bedroom. She shot him in the stomach, got back in her car, drove off. And because her gun was personalized and because she believed Celeste would get rid of that spent shell casing, that there was no need for her to get rid of the gun, to get rid of the shotgun. She had no way of knowing that police got to that shell casing before Celeste did. So when the cops had showed up to her house and asked to see her gun, she willingly turned it over because she's believing there's no way in the world they're going to connect her to the shooting because her girlfriend got rid of the one piece of evidence that would, get her in trouble. But she did not. Tracy said that over the ensuing weeks and months, she and Celeste kept in very close contact via phone calls and secret meetings. Celeste told Tracy that once Steve was released, she would not hire any home health aides because she was going to reinfect Steve's wound. Well, of course, because none of us saw this coming, once Steve died, Celeste, of course, had no use for Tracy and dropped her like the proverbial hot potato. Finally, in June, Tracy called Celeste and was informed that she wanted nothing more to do with her. And when Tracy read that Celeste had married Cole, she realized she'd been duped. In the background of all of this, Jennifer and Christina are slowly coming to realize that Celeste very likely had something to do with Steve's murder. And Christina, her daughter, she had been secretly taping her mother, who was saying things like she wanted to kill Christina and confessed to trying to have Tracy killed and just being a horrible person in general. And eventually the twins turned these tapes over to the police, and coupled with Tracy's statements, it's a done deal for Celeste. She is arrested on March 28, 2002, and when she is arrested, she's being fingerprinted, and it's all very teary, and she's very woe is me, and, my life. She hires famed defense attorney Dick DeGuerin, who is known for representing David Koresh, Waco, Branch Davidians, and convicted murderer Robert Durst. This is who she hires to defend her. He maintains that Tracy acted alone, that she's deranged and delusional, and that she was the one to take advantage of Celeste, like seducing her, I guess, that it was not the other way around, and that, bottom line, Tracy is just a crazy, obsessed, lonely woman. Of course, because all women are crazy, right? He also points the finger at Jennifer and Christina, saying that they turned against their mother because they wanted Steve's money, which they would only get if Celeste was out of the way. Celeste shows up to court for her trial with her blonde hair dyed brown. She's wearing these very prim and proper sweater sets and plain skirts, looking nothing at all like the woman who would drop $80,000 on a necklace, right? Very sedate, very conservative. Oh, and she's on crutches, though no one ever knows why. As her daughter Jennifer said to Dominic Dunn's Power, Privilege, and Justice, quote, "You never know what she's going to do." There is a parade of witnesses, including the twins, a bevy of experts, friends, and Tracy herself, who reiterated that she believed she was freeing Celeste from a horrific man and a horrific marriage, and that she and Celeste were in love and would skip off happily ever after once Steve was out of the way. All the evidence against Celeste is circumstantial, and while she comes out looking like a she-devil, you can't find someone guilty of murder for being a she-devil, so quite frankly, things could go either way for her. Well, as it turns out, it went exactly the way that it should have. After a 4-week trial and 23 hours of deliberation, Celeste was convicted of capital murder under the Texas law of parties, which basically says you're just as guilty of committing the crime as if you'd pulled the trigger yourself. She is given a mandatory life sentence and is only eligible for parole on April 1st, 2042, when she's 80. In exchange for her testimony, Tracy Charlton gets a reduced 10-year sentence and was released in 2011. She was last known to be living in San Antonio. Celeste took her case to the TV show Reasonable Doubt, which featured a retired detective and defense attorney examining murder convictions to see if there was enough evidence to warrant a new trial. Their investigation ultimately determined that nope, Celeste is right where she belongs. Jennifer and Christina haven't seen Celeste since the trial, and they don't even actually, at this stage of the game, they don't even call Celeste their mother. They only refer to her by her first name. Sadly, in 2017, Jennifer was shot at a Halloween party by her roommate at the time, Randall Jones. 2 other people were injured and 1 died. During the trial, Christina, who now goes by her married name of Christina Fritz, testified that her sister required 10 surgeries to repair the 2 wounds she suffered as a result of the shooting, that she struggles to walk or to work, and that she relies on Christina for financial support. Celeste continues to maintain her innocence, telling Snapped Behind Bars, quote, "I will never apologize for Steve's murder when I had nothing to do with it." Margot Frazier, the former Travis County sheriff, told that same program, quote, "If you don't believe she's a liar, then believe she's delusional." Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of The Dark Side of Love. I'm your host, Bianca Sloan, and show your love for The Dark Side of Love by visiting thedarksideoflove.com for show notes and transcripts. While you're there, sign up for my newsletter to be notified about new episodes, and you can also find a link to my Patreon page where you can access bonus material and other fun stuff. Learn more about my suspense novels about the dark side of love by visiting biancasloan.com. Thanks for hanging out with me, and join me next time for another tale of love gone wrong. I'll see you on the dark side.